All right. That was a little song called Voice of the Mountains. I thought it would be thematically appropriate today. A song by, let me see here, username Ruin underscore. Thank you, Ruin underscore. I hope you're not planning on bringing any ruin to this episode. Only good vibes here. No ruin. No ruination. No chaos. Unless, of course, your name is Teal. Then maybe you're about to have a bad time. Who knows? Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. We are back at it again. I apologize right up front for not podcasting, streaming, for not recording or whatever this is last week. I felt really bad. I felt gross. The depression got me good. It happens to the best of us, or maybe not, but it happens to me, and that's what's important. But here we are back at it again. I am not gripped by malaise, and I'm ready to tackle chapter 35. I don't think there's anything really great I gotta say before we get started here. I'm just chilling out here at my desk where I always am. Thanks for coming, as always. I think I already kind of said that, but to put it earnestly, thank you for attending. We got a lot to talk about. Chapter 35 is a doozy. And then, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. I just looked at the page count. I could have swore, didn't we open this last week? Didn't we open this last week and it said the page count for chapter 35 was like 13 pages? Okay, well, I've made a gross miscalculation. There are 32 pages. And that's a lot. There's a lot to talk about. I don't think we're probably going to get through this all in one episode. So if I don't, and this episode retroactively gets turned into chapter or episode 25.5 or like 0.1 or whatever, then that's why. That's the reason why. I feel like if I'm still talking at the end of like 2.5, 2 3/4 hours, I'll probably call it there. This chapter is really big. And this chapter is really big. I'll say it right up front because it dives into meta philosophy, metaphysical philosophy. That's a lot of P's. Metaphysical philosophy. There we go. I just actually had to think about the words in my head before I tried to say them. Robin's here. Hey, Robin. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. Yeah, there's a lot here. There's a lot narratively. There's a lot thematically. There's a lot outside of the narrative even. And so I'm just going to stop beating around the bush and we're going to dive right in. I've got my summary here, the good old chapter summary. Even it is kind of on the long end. I think I have 6 post-it notes here. Typically, I can get a chapter summary done in about 3 or 4. But a lot happens here, and even with the summary, I'm skimping on details. So just a heads up that as we go through this chapter, if you've read it, like I kind of hope you've read it, that's why you're watching this video, then you understand that I'm skimping over a lot of things. If you haven't read the chapter, then be aware that I'm skimping over a lot in the summary. And as we talk about the chapter, you will be elucidated as to the nature of what I'm talking about. But we've left chapter 34. Chapter 34, Teal was talking to the pilgrim. And we pick things up in chapter 35. It's not right after Teal has departed, but we join Teal amid the foothills. She's wandering through these foothills. The elevation we mentioned in the last chapter is becoming more uneven, and we really dig into that point here. And as she's walking around, the weight of her journey is starting to really get to her. It's starting to weigh her down. It's starting to hit home that she's alone, and she's in this state where she doesn't want to think, but her thoughts are all that she has. So she's kind of in a dilemma. She stops here in the foothills to have a little rest. She reflects while playing her banjo, and she actually has like a kind of a nice moment here where she's just vibing in the mountains, which is great. Love to hear that for her. Unfortunately, though, she falls into her thoughts and she longs for this unclear past, for this untenable, unknowable nostalgia that's kind of welling up inside of her. And that ain't good. And so she gets pretty fed up. She gets fed up with her yearning, and she presses on into the mountains. I'm not gonna scroll with the summary here. I'm not gonna scroll through the story. You can try to follow along as we stream, or you can read the book. You can go to chapter 35 in the link below and read my book. And if you really want, if you haven't read the book at all and you want to just skip ahead to chapter 35, you are in for a wild ride, but be my guest. But yeah, Teal gets fed up and she presses on further into the mountains. And she's at this for quite a little while, but she starts to hear this sort of sonic resonance. This, it's not quite music, but it almost sounds like singing. And she can't quite pinpoint the origin, but she surmises, after listening for a while in this sort of trance, that the mountains themselves seem to be calling out to her. And it's in this stupor that Teal wonders if maybe just trekking out into the peaks and disappearing forever is a possibility. Maybe that's just how her story goes. Maybe that's where it ends. She's in this sort of delirious, weary state, and it's while she's in this consternation that she's kind of at her lowest. She's really just very morose, and she's also kind of delirious, and it's through the same delirium that she kind of urges herself forward. She presses onward without regard for what awaits her. So she's walking a little bit more. She's kind of in a state of unreality, and she enters this valley that was mentioned by the pilgrim. She kind of becomes aware of her surroundings at that minute when it becomes crucial to be aware of where she is. She's a little wary. She's a little tense here, and she starts to hear music. She starts to hear this melody bouncing around through the fog, and she's so preoccupied by trying to hone in on the origin of this strange, ethereal tune that she doesn't even notice this little impish figure just boop suddenly appears before her. She gets pretty startled. I think even she kind of just falls over. She kind of falls over on her butt. And she gets pretty spooked, and then, she's pretty unnerved. The little fellow talks funny. They make funny noises. They look a little strange. They don't seem to correlate. Teal can see them, but they're never a stagnant figure. They never really seem like they take up space properly. And that's kind of wigging Tear? Well, she might have a little tear, but it's wigging Teal out. And yes, I see Robin is berating me in chat. They are chastising me, but I'm going to ignore them and press on. Much as Teal ignores her worries about this strange little fellow, and she starts to talk with him against her better judgment. She's not quite sure what to expect, right? She was talking to the pilgrim, and she didn't really know what to expect when they called them a beast. When she called the thing waiting for her in the valley, waiting for everyone, just waiting in the valley in general, I guess. She wasn't sure what they meant by it's a beast, but she supposed this might be it, but she's not really sure, so she kind of gives them the benefit of the doubt. And they converse and they're talking, and the longer they talk, the more disturbed Teal becomes. The little imp, the little creature, which ends up being the Wanderer, the namesake of the chapter, they seem to be able to read Teal's mind, and they also kind of know her past. And they spout all sorts of these radical claims about her life that end up being true. They pinpoint these things about Teal that Teal has never revealed to anyone. For example, for some reason, the Wanderer just knows that the bug that is with Teal, the bug that's in Teal's lamp, which no one has really paid attention to, is called Lacrimosa. They just know that. And that freaks Teal out. How do you know that? I've never told anyone that I call the moth in my lantern Lacrimosa. And so they pick away at Teal like this, and as they converse, Teal's morale seems to plummet. She becomes convinced that the sprite is more than they appear, and Teal, throughout this conversation, is coerced into taking their hand. The Wanderer basically offers her, hey, if you take my hand, I can make all your worries go away. All you have to do is just come along with me. And Teal relents. Teal reluctantly relents and takes their hand, and in this flash of disturbing imagery that comes over here, she just gets really violently sick. Which is great, right? Just, it's like when you overdose. It's like when you overdose on shrooms and you just have a wild trip and you just get really sick. Not that I've done that. Not that I would ever do that. I have taken a, a I'm not even going to talk about what I've taken or whether or not I've overdosed. That's none of your business. But despite this, despite Teal getting sick, she subverts the Wanderer's trick. I don't even really know if you can call it a trick because they were just offering her a way out, so to speak. But she lets go, right? She ends these weird side effects and she finds a second wind. And for some reason, she sticks around. She's in quite a state, but she sticks around to question this entity. Her curiosity, as always, gets the better of her. And they end up just having a conversation. And their conversation turns to the nature of the universe. And it's way too dense. It's way too dense to summarize, and I'm not even going to bother trying. We might talk about it later. Maybe. I might just leave that out. There's a lot in the notes here. We have a lot to talk about. It's already been 15 minutes, folks. I got to keep going. Throughout the whole conversation, Teal feels oddly drawn to this being, to this entity, to the Wanderer. She doesn't really know why. She struggles with this dichotomy of being grossed out, of being violated a little bit, but also finding them endearing and enchanting. And there's a quality about them that haunts her. She can't really explain it. She can't put her finger on it, but she's drawn to them for one reason or another. They go through this whole spiel. They have their big conversation, and they end up in a situation where Teal feels sympathetic for the Wanderer. They come to this realization that the Wanderer is maybe just really lonely, that maybe they've just spent all of this time alone, and maybe they just want to hang out with somebody. Maybe that's why they're just bothering Teal and being weird and malign and kind of supernatural. But regardless, even though she offers to maybe keep them company, she relents and she doubles down on her pursuit of the bell tower. And they have kind of this, it might be considered a touching goodbye. It's hard to really say. It's not really written that way, but there is feeling, there is emotion to it. And during this, the Wanderer, and it's never really explained, but they maybe work some mischief to teleport Teal just outside the bell tower. Teal just appears there all of a sudden throughout this goodbye. And afterwards, there's a small period where Teal is just crestfallen and confused, and she lingers at the precipice of her next stage in the journey. And that's where the chapter ends. Good job, everyone. We did it. Congratulations. We are so good at this game. Let's dive into the notes here and see what we can do, because we have way more notes than I had previously thought. I thought we had less notes than last time. I thought 17 pages was quite a lot, but it turns out when I read 1 of 32, I don't know how I read 1 of 13 when I came to this document the last time. I must have opened up the wrong document. But we got to do what we got to do, right? So let's dive in here and get to work. I'm gonna start off by having a little sip of water, nothing else. I would not do anything salacious on stream. I'm not that kind of cardboard entity. So we double back to the beginning. We start off our notes here, and there is this really gentle introduction. We talk about Teal wandering through the hills. What the heel? So Teal's wandering through the hills, and that's great. That's fine. There's some really lovely language here. There's some good metaphors that incorporate the rugged language, but there's not any mention of Teal's exhaustion. We mentioned that she's sore and stiff, and that's kind of the extent of it, and that's just not good enough. We're getting close to the point where Teal is about to walk off a cliff, so to speak, and she should be at the extreme of her exhaustion. And we're not doing that justice at all. There's this additional note that, and I kind of do it through the use of language, but I'm not very upfront about it. And I think that's where we lose out on this idea that Teal's mind through it here, in conjunction with her exhaustion, her mind, her mental state is something of a slurry. She is not in the right mindset to be hiking cross country. And there's no mention of it. There's no catalyst. There's no end result. We don't get to see how Teal's mind is throughout this beginning section. We're kind of just told, like, oh, she's trying not to think. And along the same line of just mentioning she's tired, I don't think that's good enough. Regardless of how we go about addressing these issues, it's important that we maintain how ragged she has become. Not just from earlier, not just because she's been walking for quite a while, but because of her exploits in part 3 at large. We're not making mention of her ragged state, of the condition of her clothing, of the damage done to the lantern, any like bruises or cuts, right? Teal has been cut a few times here in part 3. She had that blow to the head, blow to the face at the end of part 2, and there's no mention of any of this. We haven't been talking about anything like that throughout part 3. These should be things that here at the zenith of her struggles should maybe come back into focus. They should maybe be things that Teal is noticing as she's trying to reach the Zen state, so to speak, that she's trying to become thoughtless. We're pretty much at the crux of her, at the lowest point of her energy and the highest point of her mental instability. And none of that's really coming across here. We fail to mention, like I said, any of her physical damage, any of her superficial damage, even where we kind of just say, she's tired and she doesn't want to think. We waste so much potential, so much character building, so much gravitas that could be leading us into chapter 35, that could be leading us into this meeting with the Wanderer, that just isn't there. And it's really sad that I just didn't include any of that. I like the way everything's written, but we drop too many pieces here. We drop too many pieces along the way. And I know basically what I'm saying is we need to add more to chapter 35, this already behemoth of a chapter. But I think all in all, it will aid Teal and the narrative at large to reincorporate her present state. So Teal takes a little break, and that's great. I like that she has a little pause. Some of it's written a little awkwardly, though. A lot of the ideas through here are okay, but there's not really any poetic or illustrative beauty throughout here. We're trying to take this moment where Teal is really enraptured by the scenery around her, and we're not making that apparent through the text. And this is just kind of like a shortcoming of my lack of ability as a writer, which hopefully I can strengthen with another pass through here. But just, we really need to make a push for that. One way we can do that is leaning on the notion that Teal's taking a rest because she's tired. She hasn't been thoughtful, right? She's been trying not to think, and it's really just as she comes to the precipice of one of these tall hills that she thinks, okay, yeah, wow, I'm really tired. I just need to sit for a minute. We fail to address Lacrimosa's placement here. Teal sits down, right? She sits down, but she doesn't take the initiative to place the lantern anywhere. She's being very haphazard with Lacrimosa, both the lantern and the insect. Like, there's no thoughts that go out to Lacrimosa throughout here, even though we just had like such a big subversive, subconscious character relationship growth throughout the dream sequence and throughout the first part of chapter 34, and we've just hauled that out the window. We've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And that sucks, man. Why aren't we talking about the lantern? Why aren't we talking about Lacrimosa? These are such important things. And especially now that I'm really digging my teeth into draft two, I'm about 20 pages into draft two, like basically nothing. And Lacrimosa is already so much more of a key figure in draft two that reading through this again is just kind of pathetic that like I would even not consider. I would even leave Lacrimosa out of the entire scene just because like, oh, okay, whatever, they're a secondary object. They don't really come into their own until part 5. Right? That's just really lazy. I mean, I guess in a sense I know what I was doing. I was trying to leave this big character reveal that like, Lacrimosa is kind of an integral part of Teal's overall story. But it does them a disservice. It does them a disservice even as they're revealed as being an integral part of her story. If we want to even set that up, then we should be hinting at it. We should be talking about it. I don't even think it's something that needs to be revealed. It should just slowly grow naturally. From the point at which Teal meets Lacrimosa, they should, at even increments, become an increasingly relevant part of her life. So that, by the end of part 3 here, we get to really wallow in the events that happen to Miss Evergarden and her companion. So come on, man, just put the lantern in the scene. Geez, don't be lazy. What's going on with you? And then just going forward, like she should just be careful about the lantern. She just had a big spill. She just had a big fall in chapter 34 where she was really concerned about the lantern. And then she turns around and immediately just doesn't care about where she puts it. After a fall like that, she would be exceedingly careful, exceedingly precise about where Lacrimosa is, where the lantern is, in what condition it is, and where she's placing it. Especially because she's been carrying it, right? We've been talking about how she's been carrying it in her hand. And we kind of just dropped that too. Like, oh, was it not in her hands? Where did the lantern go? What was going on there? I don't know. Whatever. So throughout this scene, Teal's really trying to take this minute to let go. And I think that deserves some expansion too, and some incorporation with that concept and the music, right? She sits down to play her banjo and she's playing some music, she's playing a song, she's trying to calm herself. And it's not very apparent that she's just trying to relax, that she's just trying to put her mind at ease. And that's something we could better fold into the text here as Teal takes this little break. This pause, this respite ultimately backfires, but still the core idea here that she wants to stop, that she wants to think, that she wants to grow, that she wants to grapple with her anxieties and remember, I think essentially that she wants to remember who she is and what she cared about. Those she cared about are really integral to this scene. And right now it's all kind of wishy-washy, which is, as I've called everything else, this too is unfortunate. A big part of this scene is that Teal stops to think about the swain. And on that note of wanting her to consider her desires and what she truly longs for, this is good, right? We want Teal to be thinking about the swain, and this is pretty much the perfect time for it. Perfect, right? Purrfect, perfect. Because come on, that guy's the cat's meow, am I right? Do I have any other jokes? No, not any off the top of my head. Not any off the top of my whiskers. I don't have whiskers. Anyways, so this is a really good beat for her to be thinking about the swain, but she ought to struggle with a struggle in a greater capacity with differentiating whether her dream of the swain and her dreams at large were memories or whether they were just conjurations of her subconscious. She kind of just wallows in the fact that it might have been a dream. Maybe the Catman wasn't real, right? She kind of just like second guesses herself, and I don't think that's doing enough. I think if she was really concerned with whether or not this was a memory, something she could latch onto finally after all of this goofing around, is it's just not enough, right? It's just not enough to say, maybe. She really needs to have a beat here where she goes, ah, but what if? But what if they're real, but I can't tell? What if they are memories, but they were so distorted that I can't take uh, any solidity out of them, right? I can't cite these sources because they're not credible. You know, imagine if you're reading an academic paper and the academic paper cited some scientist's dream, you'd discount it at once. You wouldn't say that's a relevant source. Same goes for Teal here, right? She's not going to buy into a funny dream memory just because it's nice and charming and feels nostalgic. So she should have more disparity through it here. And we might go as far to say that she might even consider that all of this is just a dream, that maybe this entire thing, we're reflecting what we were talking about at the start of chapter 34, that Teal might be reconsidering. She might just be thinking, this has been such a vapid, airy experience. None of this has made any sense. Can I even be sure that what I'm experiencing right now is reality? Or is this all of the dream? We don't really want to go full, dreaming Godhead or whatever the philosophy is. But Teal should be having these doubts. She should be having these inconsistencies, that her experience here has not been what she remembers, and that much she knows. But why does she know that much? Where does her quote unquote reality end and this quote unquote reality begin? Furthermore, where does that one end and where does her dream reality begin, right? It's all a blur. It's all becoming a hazy game that she can't see the end of. And she just doesn't even think about that right now, so that's not good. Maybe she even starts to think that at the end, maybe chapter 33 there with her as the secretary in the office, maybe that was reality. That felt more grounded than anything else until the monster showed up. Maybe she has some second guessing here. Maybe she starts thinking, well, maybe I'll just go back to sleep. Maybe I'll close my eyes and try to get back there again. Maybe that's how I get out of here all this time. And, that would be some pretty harrowing foreshadowing for later. But for now, let's keep pressing on. You can see, right? Are you aware? Are you aware how nested and unnested we're getting here? This is some bullshit. I hope you all appreciate how stupid this looks, my notes, and how ridiculous it was to write them. Do you see? I think this one here, this green one, right beside my head on the left here. This one, I think we're 8 layers deep here. I think that's an 8-layer deep note. But let's get back on track here quick before we go off the rails. So Teal is having this moment here where she's ruminating about the Swain and having her pick up on something gentle, something close to her heart, like how stupid the Swain is, how she hates how, quote unquote stupid he is. I think an idea like that should remain, but the notion itself, it really just comes out of nowhere. Right. We're in this paragraph here where she's longing, she's pining, she's expressing that she hates all of his stupid features. And it really just comes out of nowhere, unfortunately. It sort of builds up. There is definitely an incline, but it's a very steep one. And I think this idea that she has feelings for the Swain, that she maybe is discovering that she's in love with a dream, should be something that creeps up on her. It should be something that slowly comes to fruition. This frustration that, like, oh wait, why do I keep thinking about parts of this dream cat? Why is this making me angry? Why is the fact that I no longer have them also making me sad? Like it was just a dream, wasn't it? Why am I getting so worked up about this? It should be something that sneaks up on Teal, something she's unsure of, something she has to wrestle with. Um, this is just like these are just small notes, right? And we can just rattle these off quick. She calls herself stupid here. She should really, this would be something she would do, like, and this is just kind of a, this is an in character moment. She's chastising herself here, and she would likely call herself stupid out loud. And if she were to do that, I think maybe she even does. I don't remember. Not really important, but she should, and if she does, it should be in Elvish, right? She's talking to herself here. She's chastising herself. She's teasing herself. I have a moment like this where in draft 2, I've already had moments like this. This is a very Teal thing to do, to kind of just like berate herself a little bit under her breath, and to do it in Elvish because that is her language. She is kind of taking this natural domestic language of hers, and it's twofold. It's close to her heart, but it's also probably how she would have heard, right? She would have been chastised. She would have been scolded in Elvish. She would have been reprimanded in Elvish, her native tongue. So for her here, even though by this point in the text, we all are pretty sure that Teal is much more comfortable speaking Common. Her thoughts are in Common. She expresses herself much more fluidly in Common. But still, even at a moment where she's calling herself an idiot, she would do it in Elvish. Kind of like, a callback, a bit of like trauma sprinkling, but then also a self-reflection. And the reflection here isn't a one-to-one, right? It's not a perfect mirror. It's kind of like distorted a little bit, where Teal sees her reflection, and the reflection is herself as an elf, so to speak, or in Elvish society. Maybe she just thinks it. Who knows? Just like we can use this scene to do more character building, and we're also kind of just not doing that, and it's not good. She feels guilty here. She thinks about the Catman, and then she starts to feel guilty about like, why did I leave? Why am I not there? If I knew my loved ones, if I know they're not here, then why am I not why am I not where they are? Right? And she starts to feel guilty. And her guilt here is just kind of like misguided. She doesn't really know yet. She doesn't really have a reason to blame herself for not being where she feels she should be. And so for her at this point to feel guilty doesn't really make much sense. I think it's apt that she feels extremely confused and very homesick. And we should really just dive into that. We should wallow in that instead. We should be exploring Teal's feelings right now. We should be diving into why she feels this way. But the confusion and the heartache should be wrapped into that. I don't know why she's feeling guilty. Maybe she can be feeling guilty, right? But if we're going to incorporate guilt, it needs to be along these same lines. It needs to be folded into this omelet, I guess, that we're making here. But right now she just feels strangely guilty and like, oh, it's my fault. But like, why is it your fault, girl? You don't know why it's your fault. So why do you feel that way? And at the end of the day, she just shouldn't be. She just shouldn't be feeling that way. It's silly. This is again a part she might speak out loud. She might apologize. She might say out loud, I want to go home. And, just to express, just to have little moments of character building where, yes, Teal is isolated. Teal is feeling terrible at this moment in time. And she's so lonely and so racked with homesickness that she's willing to just speak aloud to herself. She's kind of crept over that edge of insanity where, I don't know, maybe cabin fever has set in, so to speak, and she's just willing to socialize with her fractured psyche. Even if just socializing, in big air quotes here, is apologizing and, just kind of blubbering and whatnot. If she is talking to herself, however, it's just important that we remember, yes, those comments would be made in Elvish. Here's a funny aside. Here's a fun aside. My nephew walked in on me working last night, and I'm working on draft two, so there's a lot more. Already, there's so much more usage of Hansa for the Elvish, right? Teal is speaking a lot more Elvish because it's something on my mind, right? This was a big thing we had to correct. And throughout the beginning of the book, there's like a ton of Elvish. I think in chapter one, the first half of chapter two, all we really get is Teal uttering in Elvish until she's kind of cut off guard and like, oh, wait, no, that's not what people speak here, I guess. I should swap my tactics, right? And so my nephew walks in and I'm translating some Hansa, trying to find like which one is the most appropriate for the given situation. And I don't know if any of you have ever had the situation of trying to explain to a nearly 10-year-old why you're using Chinese in your funny little book. But it was it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. But then the great thing about kids is I just explained it. I was very forthright and upcoming about it. Forthcoming. I guess I just said forthcoming twice. But yeah, they were just like, oh, okay. Like they were just like, oh, okay, you're using Chinese in your book. That's fine. I guess that makes sense. Kid didn't have like, oh, that's weird. Kid didn't have any preconceptions of like how a book should be written. They were just like, oh, that's cool. And then they moved on with their life, right? If only everyone could be so open-minded as a nearly 10-year-old. But it was pretty funny. I'm just sitting there. I have like two screens full of different Pinyin and Hansa, trying to find the right one. And you know, nephew walks in like, hey, what are you doing? What's with all these funny words? Oh, you're using them to make fake funny words? They're not even fake. That's the thing. They're just like, I'm just trying to inject Mandarin into my book. 9-year-old just like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Whatever. Whatever, you big weirdo. Keep writing your book. Poor kid's probably never going to read the thing anyway. Much like most people. Let's get back on track here. So, sorry, I got a yawn. Oh, oh, wow. That yawn came out of nowhere. Which is strange because I didn't have caffeine. I made sure to have a decaf, and normally if I have a decaf before a stream, I am fine in the energy department. But I'm seeing it's already been 40 minutes and I've done nothing but yammer. So this doesn't bode well for my endurance for the rest of the stream. Let's try to dig our teeth in and keep on going though. So Teal comes back to this idea regarding the Swain. And that's good. Like, it isn't bad that she does that, but the way it's set up is too forced. It should be something that she slips into. These thoughts, these, her pining for the Swain should be something that she descends into without really realizing it. As it stands right now, she kind of just starts thinking about it and has like a great big sigh and goes, oh, the Swain. Oh, if only I could be back with them again, right? And she puts the back of her hand up to her forehead and swoons. And that's stupid. That's dumb. That's not how people think. So could we maybe have less of a jarring narrative and add some nuance to that? I think it would be great if we did. And this is a sticky point, right? This is a sticky point we get here. Teal has a moment where she considers having emotions, having romantic feelings for a beast person, for an animal person. And it's very much framed as being attracted to somebody of a different race. And we can talk about that academically, I think, without getting up in arms. I think we can all be reasonable about this, especially given the circumstances that we are talking about. Like, yep, that man is a cat and Teal is a human and an elf, right? We're already like steeped in different racial considerations. But it does hit close to home, right? And that's kind of the idea. But I don't know. Rereading this, I'm not sure I know I want it to be something that's mentioned, and that it would be on some, like this definitely is something that's on Teal's mind. It is a valid thing for Teal to think, but I'm not sure if this is the book to be handling that kind of a topic. But at the same time, it's such a it's such a valid consideration of Teal's, and we don't really get into why until later. That as I read this section for the notes, I felt a little torn, like, oh, should I cut this part out? Should we be talking about mixed race relationships in this silly little fantasy book? And ultimately, I think, I don't know. We'll get through the notes. We'll get through the notes. I'm pretty sure I answered myself in through it here, but let's keep going throughout this. Um, and I guess a big thing here is the question: how do we point out that Teal's knows it's kind of weird to be enchanted by a Catman, but that she doesn't really care? How do we express that idea concisely? How do we present this notion that yes, Teal is concerned that I'm in love with somebody who is clearly not is neither an elf nor a human, right? Teal is considering her lineage and reflecting it against her romantic interest. And she's asking these questions about herself. Why am I attracted to this guy? Should I not be? Should I be only interested in elves or humans? Am I being kind of racist by thinking about this? Am I being kind of ignorant by limiting myself to those of a similar race? Um, and this is something I don't really have an answer for right now, but it's important that we exemplify that Teal, having these thoughts, comes to the conclusion that she values love and kindness above genetic difference. That she feels there isn't, she shouldn't be bothered that the Swain is a cat person, because ultimately, if she loves someone, if she has such strong feelings for someone, and if she views them as an important aspect of her life, as a significant other, then what does it matter? What does it matter to Teal if the love of her life is a cat man or anything else, right? They could be a fish person, even though that would be ridiculous because fish can't walk on land. So how would that even work? Um, and I kind of just fight myself in my notes here. Like at one point, right, I start off by being kind of hesitant, but then I want to push the issue. I want to delve into it, and I think it's not something that Teal would ignore. I don't think this is something that Teal would necessarily just not grapple with. It's something that Teal would be thinking about, and it would be kind of bothering her. Should I be loving this entity that is racially different? Is it wrong of me to be considering that? And, I think probably, right? I think probably is the answer. I think that's probably something where Teal ends up, that, yeah, thinking about that isn't very nice of me, and I should just love a person because I love them, regardless of who or what they are. Um, and ultimately, and like I said, this is something that we kind of dip our toes into later, so it's not something we can really answer very well right now. But we need to mention that from Teal's perspective, having this relationship, or even just considering it, even having these dreams, fills her with this sensation of doing something taboo. It emanates within her a shame that she should not be with, or even thinking about, a relationship with this individual, with an individual like the Swain, right? Um, and I don't know how we describe that in the abstract. This green note here might be a chunk for later on, where we explain that yes, being in relationship, being in interracial relationships is a taboo thing where Teal is from. Um, I don't think this is something we can really bring up right now, given that Teal is an amnesiac and she can't really remember social norms. But she should still be having this doubt of like, I'm maybe not too sure. I'm not so certain. Why am I not certain? Why do I feel this way? Is this racist of me? Y/N? Um, Regardless, though, through all of this, like I said, we need to be clear. We need to be apparent. We need to push this idea front and center that Teal's feelings towards the Swain, even though they're airy, even though they're dreamy, even though she's not super certain whether or not they exist, they still exist. And they transcend all of these petty barriers. Teal's sitting here pining for this perhaps imaginary individual because she loves them, because she has romantic feelings for, the Swain or her interpretation of the Swain. And regardless of them being who they are and what they were born as, Teal is going to look past all of that because her affections, her desires, one might say, supersede that and transcend that and are willing to combat that, right? To be at odds with these social norms that she's kind of like fuzzily, weirdly half remembering. We get to this point, and this is kind of a weird ending, right? We just had this big serious note, but we come to this weird ending where Teal has like some sort of perverted ideas. And her concept of perverted ideas is, I'm pretty sure she's sitting here and like thinking about holding the Swain's paws, and she gets really flustered, she gets really upset, and she ends up kind of chastising herself, and then she storms off. This is sort of how the sequence ends. Is she has these sort of um, salacious ideas about holding hands, and I like that idea. I think it's a great way to end this segment and have Teal storm off. But I think she might even go a little further. She might even kind of rage out loud in Elvish and stomp off. And doing this would add a nice layer of nuance, um, because we inject the scene, right. And this goes back to what we were just talking about. So it's all kind of enveloped in the same idea. Having just talked about deeply relevant racial issues on whether or not it's okay to love another despite being of quote unquote different races, right? It's very overt in the book, but it's very it's a very subconscious thing in reality, a very like non-point in reality that people are super fussed about, even though it's not a thing. Love is love, right? I'll say it. I'll say it for all of my 88 subscribers. Love is love. Grow up. Um, we just had this really dense and really critical moment of Teal questioning both her preferences, her sexual preferences, her romantic preferences, I should say, and juxtaposing that against greater societal philosophies on whether or not it's okay to be in a relationship with somebody who isn't necessarily of the same genetic pool. And we've gone through all that. We had a really dense conversation. Teal reflects back and forth. She doesn't really. I think she does come to an answer. I think in the second draft, she should ultimately come to the point of like, yeah, I think this is just silly, and I'm thinking about it too much. And if I love this person, then I love them, and it doesn't matter who or what they are. I want to be with them. But then we take that and we immediately just smack it into the ground and go, hey, by the way, isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how Teal didn't chastise herself about that, but she's willing to like reprimand herself for thinking about holding hands. Um, I just like that idea that she has these deep, prolific thoughts, and then she's just like, no, wait a minute, I shouldn't be thinking about holding hands. That's improper. But thinking about dating a cat man, whatever, that's fine. Holding hands, though, good gracious, no, never, never in my life would I ever. How de rigueur, how unflattering, how crass. I don't think de rigueur actually fits into that list of words, but you know what I'm going for. Um, all in all, after this experience, she should just be really flustered when she leaves. She should be on the verge, she should be red. She should be blushing. She should just like stomp on out of here, very tsundere style. Um, and even, blaming her insanity. She's blaming her mania for like, why on earth am I thinking about such terrible things? Holding the paws of some stupid, dreamy cat man. I'm getting out of here, right? I'm ditching. I'm leaving. Um, there's just some good writing in here afterwards, and we'll kind of just pass over that. You don't need to read my notes on how like, oh, good job, Junko, you wrote a good thing for once. Um, but we move on, and Teal too is moving on. She's kind of in the mountains proper after this sequence. And there's this sentiment that Teal is shrinking among the mountains, that the mountains are kind of growing around her and becoming these monoliths, and Teal is becoming this insignificant speck among them. Um, and I think that idea needs more weight. It's really just a couple sentences right now. Um, it should be something that's really important that we emphasize that Teal is dwindling, that she is becoming more and more insignificant the further she proceeds. This is something we talk more about later, that when she's talking with the Wanderer, Teal feels like she basically doesn't exist, that her self doesn't matter when compared to the Wanderer. And this, in the middle bit where she feels really small amongst the mountains, should also be like a stepping stone on the path that we take before we get to the Wanderer. Teal needs to kind of dwindle in size and perspective through it here. Um, there's some allusions to ringing here. We bring back the idea of Teal's ears ringing, and we mention it in a way as if to suggest that the previous ringing, the previous sonic experience that Teal was dealing with during her bouts of madness has tapered off, that it's stopped, and that it's coming back. And that idea just isn't right. It shouldn't have stopped. It should never have stopped. She maybe got to a point where she wasn't noticing it, but it should never have just faded out completely and come back. That's just not right, right? That's not what we're trying to get across here, not trying to explain. We can even just say it's something Teal is becoming used to as she's traveling, but it should never be even alluded to that the ringing in her ears is outright stopped. This new ringing, we talk about the mountains making this noise. This new ringing should be something completely different, though. The reason she does notice it, as apart from the regular ringing in her ears, is because it's different. Because it sounds like something she hasn't grown used to. And I don't really know if that makes a lot of sense, but it's this idea that we should be pushing through it here, is that A, the ringing in Teal's ears has subsided and she's grown used to it, but it is still there. B, there is a new noise. There is a new sensation that Teal is aware of because it is not A. B exists because it is not A. The classic philosophical rhetoric. When something exists because it is not the thing that exists. My favorite, definitely not phallic argument. But yeah, just something we need to address throughout here. That the mountains are making a noise, and it's not the same noise that Teal is hearing. There is this nice disturbing quality that the mountains have this singing quality to them, but throughout here, we as readers don't get a really good sense for the transition of the environment, for the ecotone that Teal is traveling through. She really just goes from being in the foothills to being in the mountains. There is no transition. There is no Teal walking along and discovering that the foothills are growing in height. It just doesn't feel like Teal's traveling, and that is a big red flag. That is something we can't just skirt around. Teal needs to feel like she's moving through this environment and that it's taking a long time. This ties into the idea that Teal is kind of shrinking, that she is becoming less and less the deeper into these heaping, hulking mountains she progresses. We can have Teal's perception smear. We don't have to have her notice everything, but we do need a transition throughout here, and we need to incorporate that idea of Teal becoming diminished throughout this transition. This would be a great place for some delirium, right? We can break up the monotony of describing the environment by reflecting, by reminding readers, hey, Teal's kind of going a little nuts. She's been walking and she's just been stuck with her mind for the past who knows how long, and she's going a little bonkers. It'd be a great moment to have kind of like a flip-flopping. Here's some environment, here's Teal going a little crazy. Here's some environment, here's Teal looking at an acorn or something. Who knows? Gazing at Lacrimosa. Readers should have a good idea that Teal has been traveling relentlessly, but Teal should have the idea that, wow, I am a blob. I am a blob that is becoming less and less blobby because the mountains are growing around me and I'm getting a little scared, but they're also really beautiful and sublime and I can't stop listening to them. Overall, this segment should feel somewhat droning, as if Teal is covering a lot of distance, but that distance, as far as we're aware of it, is broken up into fragmented segments to reflect Teal's fragmented consciousness. Like I was saying, we can have bits where she's a little more up, right? Maybe she's a little more aware, and then reflect those with passages where Teal is just off her rocker, just thinking about the most nonsense stuff, just repeating and repeating and repeating all of this haphazard, clueless gibberish in her mind, as we not only approach the epoch of her insanity, but reveal to the reader that, hey, I'm not just saying Teal's going insane. I'm not just telling you her mind is a slurry. We are experiencing it. We are getting a first-hand look at what that means by describing both her observations in this state and how that is not a constant thing. How she is not able to constantly maintain observing, because that's how much of a pudding her brain is turning into right now. I mentioned something here, and I know exactly what it is. I'm kind of talking about the atmosphere here as Teal longingly stares at the mountain. Not just one, the mountains, rather. And I describe it as a deep and haunting blue. And we just dropped the ball. That is the most perfect time to start Teal thinking about Azure, right? Azure, of all people. We're talking about a deep and haunting blue, and we're not talking about Azure. What am I thinking? What am I doing? I'm not. That's the problem. I'm like Teal. I got Jello for a brain. I actually don't have a brain. This box is full of packing peanuts. I'm surprised they don't fly out. I should really have the top of my head taped shut again. That's probably how my brain fell out, actually. I wonder, I hope whoever ran off with it, is making good use of my brain, because Lord knows I wasn't. But yeah, we have this opportunity to mention Azure, and we just don't, and that kind of sucks. But this is something we can fold into her mania. This is something we can express, that she's thinking, she's pining, she is nostalgic and longing for her past, even though all she can bring up of it are fragments. And despite that, she's still delighted to do that even the correlation between this foggy, oppressive, dour atmosphere makes her think about her half-sister, makes her think about Azure. And likewise, we can also tie this into her delirium, that this is just like a wave, one of many waves that keep crashing over Teal as she's desperately trying to make her way to the bell tower. That this is another instance of just mindless gibbering going on behind her eyelids, that she's just like, oh yeah, huh, those clouds are pretty nice. Kind of makes me think of Azur. I wonder what Azur's doing right now. Wouldn't it be great if Azur was here? I bet Azur would get through these mountains fine. I bet like Azur would have a horse or something. Azur would be on a horse and they wouldn't even have to walk, and that'd be fine. And I wonder what not walking is like. That'd be great. I wish I had a horse. Right? Just absolute nonsense. But we can do both at the same time. That's what I'm trying to say. Much like this stream and me talking, it would be absolute nonsense. I believe in chat, Robin is insinuating they flew off with my brain. And you know what I say to that? Good riddance. Good riddance. I didn't need that darn thing anyways. I took a little sip of water. I hope you didn't notice. Maybe you did notice. Maybe you thought it was refreshing. Maybe it reminded you to go drink some more water of your own, because staying hydrated is very important. And on that note, I am just adjusting my microphone, and maybe I can get it to stay in place a little more secure. It's kind of wobbly. That really didn't help, but whatever. It's not falling over, so I can't complain. Wow, we are only 4 pages in, and I am exhausted. We are only, what is that, an eighth of the way through, and I am absolutely just poops. Let's keep going. Let's see how ragged I can get. If by the end of this stream I am just a puddle on the ground, I am just a soup, then so be it. Thus ends the career of Junco Snow, failed author and big stinky poo-poo head. Put that on my tombstone, by the way. So reading through this segment with regards to Teal in the Mountains, I don't dislike any of it really, but I have to wonder if we can improve upon its tone. And this is really just like the ultimate point. We're reaching this point by incorporating all of the previous ideas. That how do we incorporate her delirium? How do we incorporate her dreamy observations? How do we incorporate all of that Teal is experiencing and fold it into this narrative while expressing that she is really just losing her shit? And yeah, I don't want to dip back into the trope of, oh, Teal's seeing things, Teal's experience things that aren't really there. But I want to delve into the realm of like, Teal is just talking to herself more here. Teal is making observations that are just kind of ridiculous. Teal's really isolated. She feels alone. A lot of what she says here, right? A lot of what she thinks shouldn't just be thoughts. They should be utterances into the air. Because at this point, Teal is feeling so morose and so helpless that she's really just willing to like, yeah, whatever. The sound of my own voice is better than the endless silence that is surrounding me. Yeah, she should just be talking to herself, and these should be more subtle instances of her insanity enveloping her and becoming kind of like the only rock she really has in her life. But we need to incorporate this all into the narrative more holistically. On that note, she might be talking to Lacrimosa, right? Lacrimosa hasn't featured very much in this chapter up until now, and I think that would be a good way to fix it, is to have Teal speak out loud to them. This might be kind of a confusing thing. The dichotomy of Teal speaking Elvish and Teal talking to Lacrimosa might have some overlap that might not work. But regardless, Lacrimosa should come up. Teal should be talking out loud to them or herself. And we should really be exemplifying that Teal's thoughts here are just absolutely cracked. She should be making observations and then kind of like maybe not berating herself, but making observations about her observations, making observations about herself, making observations, right? Just to exemplify that she is not in a state of mind where she is calm and collected and mindful, that she is scattered, that she is all over the place, that she is in a state where she's just like, yeah, haha, dumb half elf, why are you even here? Why are you here traipsing through the mountains? What brought you here? Oh, yes, you wanted to find the bell tower, didn't you? Oh, good, good, good. Let's go find the bell tower. Yes, that sounds like one of the best plans I've ever heard. You got off a boat in the middle of nowhere and talked to an old man, and then another old man, and then an old woman, and went, you know what? Those three really inspired me. I'm going to go find a bell tower. I don't even know where it is, but I'm going to go spend the rest of my life looking for it. Right? Just almost like mad at herself, angry with what she's done. Um, and we can, I've talked about this last time, that we want to start getting more into a visual element. And if able, and this is a big if able, this would be a great time to have Teal's thinking font slowly slip into this manic thought font. This font we're using to represent her insanity, that even Teal can't escape her insanity, that it is in essence part of herself as an inner turmoil. It isn't her reacting to the world around her. The insanity's always been there. It's always a part of her, right? It's just exacerbated. It's just brought out by the conditions in which she is presently existing. Um, much like anyone has the capacity to do terrible, awful things and think completely insane jargon. It's just whether or not they crack under pressure. And I would argue that one cracks under pressure in many different ways, and some of them aren't conventionally or tropey. They aren't considered madness, but even survivors of war trauma, one could argue trauma is an aspect of insanity. And I am using these catch-all terms, right? I don't mean to say that like Teal is lesser because of her insanity. I'm trying to say that she is expressing these things because she's clearly going through it. This is all really, at the end of the day, an expression of trauma. Teal is absolutely being traumatized by her ordeals here, and this is kind of what's becoming of it. She is just sort of losing her grasp on reality. Let's keep going. So Teal comes to the conclusion that the mountains are singing, that they have this song. And we should make an inclusion that it's a song that Teal can't really perceive very well because she isn't a mountain. And only a mountain could understand the song of another mountain. And I know that doesn't really make much sense, but think of it as listening to an opera, let's say. An opera, and I'm just using that for like North American listeners, because most North American listeners have no idea what people in operas are singing about. Obviously, Europeans have a much greater chance of like, oh yeah, no, I just listen to opera. I know what the Italian operas or the German operas or the French operas are all about. But for most people in North America, anyway, when you hear an opera, right, when you listen to like Pagliacci, you don't listen and go, huh, I know what they're singing about. You know the emotion. You know what the music is trying to convey. You know the sorrow of Vesti la Juba, right? When the clown is singing about putting on the makeup and he's heartbroken, and there's all of these sonorous, heartbreaking strings that accompany the wailing, sobbing of the clown as he makes his case. You don't know, right? You don't know the actual words that he's saying in that moment, but you know that there is an emotion behind it, that there is impact behind it. You can still feel the emotion regardless of the lyrics. And that's kind of what I'm alluding to here, that Teal feels this sensation coming out of the mountains, but she can't perceive it precisely because she isn't a mountain. That isn't her native language. She doesn't speak the language that the song is being sung in, but she still knows it's calling to her, that it's drawing her, that it's bringing her somewhere, that it's expressing longing and desire. Um, and we're trying to express this idea that, yeah, the mountains are actually, whether or not they are actually singing. And this is another aspect of Teal, oh, did the model break? No, it's still blinking. Okay, no, we're good. Okay, false alarm, false alarm. Um, I thought we had to hang up. We need to make this point prevalent that yes, the mountains are probably calling to her, but they're also probably an aspect of Teal's insanity throughout this segment. Um, but regardless of their origin, they are still calling to her. They are still drawing her as if the world itself is coercing Teal into giving up, into quitting, into just jump off the path, girl. Just get off the path and go into the mountains. It's fine. Nothing bad will happen. In fact, it'll be such a pleasant release that it'll be better than whatever you're doing right now. So just go ahead and wander to the mountains. It's fine. Um, and because that's kind of the point we end up in, right? That's kind of where we end up. And it's sad when you think about it too much. Like, I never overtly write Teal thinks about committing herself to oblivion, but yeah, no, Teal is straight up, and like content warning, I guess. Teal straight up gets to the segment and thinks, I maybe I will just go kill myself. Maybe I will just go into the mountains and die, because that sounds maybe a little better than whatever I'm doing right now. And that's pretty morose. Teal stopping to listen to, she considers this oblivion among the mountains should be more impactful, right? It's kind of just haphazardly mentioned right now, but even if me saying that out loud was enough of an indicator, it needs to have more weight, right? What I'm trying to say is me saying that out loud had more weight than it does in the text right now. And I was being pretty casual about it right now. But given the book, given this place in the book right now, this should be a definite chapter marker and being like, yep, no, Teal is considering ending it all. Teal is considering giving up. Like, not just her quest to the bell tower. Sure, yeah, she's giving that up, but she's calling it quits. She ain't coming back. She ain't finding the path later. She's going into the mountains and that's it. She's not coming back out. So it should be more impactful. I don't think we want to outright just express, yes, Teal is giving up. Teal is going to die in the mountains, but we need to make this beat an important one in the overall arc of the chapter. I think this can be vastly improved if we just better tie in the idea that she's walking, or, kind of even maybe gliding, given her state of mind, through the mountain. We don't put Teal in the right space here, which is silly. Very silly. Why don't we do that? Why is Teal not among the mountains? Why is she not trying to move through the mountains? It's very much like I said earlier, she just kind of appeared in them, and then stuff is happening, and then later on she's not in them anymore. Instead of having this transition where she is proceeding through the mountains, and she comes to a roadblock where, yes, the mountains are singing to you, Teal. What do you do? Right? Like a D&D encounter. Teal, you're stopped by the mountain sirens. What do you do? And Teal fails her saving throw. Much like, never mind, I better not say that. That'll trigger Robin. Teal fails her saving throw, and she stops and thinks about, maybe I'll just go into the mountains. But then she gets a follow-up saving throw, and she passes that, and she leaves. And that's all very silly, right? That's not the way it should be. Teal should have this natural progression through this space. We should also kind of express it more that this moment of her stopping to listen is a beat of paralysis brought upon by her delirium. She considers in this time how eerily similar the Song of the Mountain is to the bell tower, right? We've been kind of trying to incorporate this idea that the bell tower has been silently calling to Teal this whole time, that she feels drawn to this invisible sonic reverie that she, attributes to the bell tower. And we can, in this moment, make an allusion to that by saying, yeah, at this time, maybe she starts thinking, oh, maybe it wasn't the bell tower that was calling me. Maybe it was these mountains. Maybe it was this area that had been calling to me the whole time. And maybe I should just, since it has been calling to me and not the bell tower, maybe I'll just stop here. Maybe I'll just stop here and go about my, whatever last aspect of my life there is left. Um, and it's moments like this, right? And this is kind of why I want to bring it up earlier. This idea of Teal talking to herself. It's moments like this where Teal is pretty much actively considering suicide. Were she to express this out loud, it would have such more weight. It would have such more emotional impact. That was such a loud robin. Oh my goodness. I wonder if it was standing right outside my window. I hope that didn't pick up on mic. I apologize if it did. That was a very, very noisy little bird. And it wasn't our robin. It was one of those terrible little thrushes that wiggle around all over the place and attack worms. Not our good little passerine friend over there. But yeah, Teal should be, if Teal is going to utter any of this out loud, it adds so much more of a deep weight to the scene where she is, just not internally recognizing that that's what she could do, that maybe that's kind of what she wants to do in this moment, but externally realizing it by birthing it into reality. There's a lot to be said of, well, I guess it always goes along with the idea of like the power of positive thinking, where if you express things in such a way, then they will realize themselves, right? Self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. But that can go both ways, and I think this is an example of it where Teal can just be having a really bad moment and just straight up say to herself, maybe I'll just go die, right? Maybe I'll just go into the mountains and end it all. She's so exhausted in this moment that her mind has no filter on it. There is no difference between what is coming out of Teal and what is going on in her mind. She is just like verbally expressing her thoughts and ruminations in this moment. And we can harken this back to having her address Lacrimosa to make some of these feelings and expressions that she's having and throughout this segment more potent. As if to say to Lacrimosa, who would notice I was gone anyway? She might even say to them, you would be glad to be rid of yourself from this prison. Because, from Teal's point of view, the only reason Lacrimosa is still within the lantern is because she needs them around. And she's not certain that they would stay around if they had their freedom. And she can just make super scathing remarks to that right now, that like, yeah, I am being a pretty awful person, aren't I? Like, I am disgusting, aren't I, Lacrimosa? You of all people would know that best because I've imprisoned you like the monster I am. And it might even, we can just exemplify that Teal is completely cracked by having her laugh. By just showing that, yeah, no, Teal's kind of unhinged. Teal is just laughing at herself and how pathetic she is. But despite that, despite having the reflection to know what I'm saying right now is ridiculous, she still persists along the same path to show that, like, yeah, she's kind of cracked right now, but she is definitely considering it. She is definitely thinking about maybe just not going any further. Ramping up her mania, ramping up her instability to this point of discomfort for the reader would do a lot to push the envelope here. We can pull it back down, right? And Teal can almost be having this struggle with herself by trying to maintain a sense of reality, desperately trying to cling to rationality when her mind is clearly not in that department at all. Teal can hit these highs of this discomfort that we've been talking about, and then pull it back down with her internal considerations, um, making it this kind of discussion. She's having an argument with herself, right? And there's part of herself that is rational and a little more hopeful, and then there's another part of herself that is just steeped in despair and just completely uh, um, fraught with emotion. An emotion from so many different things, right? And like, she's not wrong. None of the arguments her emotional self make are wrong. But at the end of the day, is it really the right thing to do? I don't know, right? I don't know. And we get to this point where we have a blank page. I don't know if I can even find it. I think we passed it already. There's just, it's not in the book, but I have a line of text here just saying, like, yeah, no, leave a blank page. There's going to be a blank page here where Teal butts up against herself and she doesn't really have a great answer. And there is just thoughtlessness. There is just, I don't know the answer. Would it be better if I just gave up? It would end the pain, shouldn't it? Or do I keep persisting where I know the task before me is hopeless and vapid and confusing, and maybe it doesn't have an end either, but at least it is working towards something. It isn't just giving up right now. And I really like that idea. I really love this concept of incorporating not only the font as a visual medium within the book, but also the negative space of the book itself as pacing within the book itself. Um, we're not just saying through text, it was silent in the mountains. We're exemplifying through physical media, through the spacing of physical media, that there was silence in that period. Um, we can even set up the blank pages maybe a little better by having a line that just reads, "The mountains made the reply," and then there was silence, right? And like, it's just the blank pages. The mountains made the reply. There's blank pages in between. Um, I think, right, that's kind of like a little highbrow, and I think that might go over some people's head. But I don't really care. I don't think I care if that goes over some people's head. I think it's poetic in a sense. It's artistic, and as somebody who is a big dweeb and an artist and a big romantic, I just love the idea, and I think we can tie it in better. Um, and I think, should we tie it in better with these previous ideas, then we'll have the climax of a really poignant, really emotional beat. Um, and we can end this off by this is me just kind of twisting the knife a little bit. We end it after this blank page before Teal transitions into the valley, which is kind of the next big beat. We end it with all of these maybes. There's a lot of maybes. Maybe it's the reason, like, what drew Teal out of the silence, what drew her to keep pushing on. And it's just a lot of, maybe it was this, maybe it was that, maybe it was something within her, maybe it didn't really matter, maybe none of this really happened. And I think we could even just do away with this and have some really just heinous, just disgusting subtext by scrapping all of this and just have Teal sigh. Teal just sighs and like draws in her cloak and shivers a little and just moves on with her life. We don't know. We'll never know. We will never have any context or closure for why Teal moves on from this idea. And I don't think I don't know, maybe we deserve it, maybe we don't. Maybe it doesn't deserve an explanation. Maybe it doesn't warrant one. Maybe it's better if we don't give one, right? I feel like something like that where we don't touch on it is way better at describing how Teal feels in a subtle way than saying, oh, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. I think we should just do away with all these maybes. Just have Teal have a moment of profound disparity here at the crux of her ambition, and then she just moves on, and then she just keeps going. What else can she do? She can climb into the mountains, or she can just keep going. And she made her choice. And boy, did she choose. She chooses to keep going into the mountains further and further until she ends up at a helpful little valley, a wonderful little valley described to her by the pilgrim. How are we doing on time? An hour and a half. Okay, we are definitely not getting through all of these notes in one take. Maybe I'll do like a makeup stream next week. We're definitely gonna have to break this episode into two parts. But hey, so be it. So be it. It's good content, right, folks? It's good content. I see doing stuff for fun showed up, and I didn't say hi. Oops, sorry. Retroactive hi in case you come back and watch the VOD. I was too busy blabbering. Most people don't show up to these streams anyway because they're just. I imagine they'll be better as VODs. So hey, thanks for tuning in. We're halfway through, maybe. We're like 3/5 of the way through. Thanks for coming out. Yeah, whatever, Robin. Bite me. Da, 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 da. So we get to the segment, and we're into the valley, and we've really dropped a lot of Teal's internal repetitions. And this note isn't pertinent to what's going on in the book right now at this juncture, but it's just an observation that, and I think this goes hand in hand with us really not delving into Teal, wallowing in her delirium throughout this section. But we haven't talked about her, her up, her just one step and then another, these mantras she's been repeating to herself just to cling to reality. And that's all just really dropped. Once Teal has become really dead from fatigue to the state where she's just so exhausted that she doesn't even have the energy to hallucinate, she might drop this, right? And that's kind of like we're really getting to the point here towards the end of chapter 35, maybe even into like chapter 36. Teal just hits the point where she's so exhausted, she's just so deadened and burdened by lethargy that she just can barely even communicate. And maybe that's when it stops, maybe that's when, but like we just don't talk about it right now, and we don't even mention why we don't talk about it. And it really ought to be and maintain being part of this mountain scene and part of the memory scenes, at least. Like I said, kind of towards the back of chapter 35 and into chapter 36, there's so much going on, and Teal's so tired that I think we can start to drop it. But it's unfortunate that, especially given that we want to build up her insanity, her imbalanced mental state, that she just doesn't express any of those previously established ideas. So we talk about how the valley is cold, and that's good. I like that. But I think we ought to give this more of a slow build. We don't, we kind of just mention, oh, it's cold here, and that is right, but we need to have it start out, kind of cool, maybe around the freezing point, and then transition into a below freezing atmosphere to incorporate this slow build that fosters tension regarding the wanderer's appearance, right? We want to reflect the tension of the narrative in the atmosphere that Teal is experiencing. For readers, that means we drive this home by describing the landscape, but for Teal, it should, kind of be more of the same. And this harkens back to what we were saying about describing the transition in environments. We fail that again, right? We fail that again, and it's at the detriment of building tension and building the scene. We need to allow readers to go through this environment, whereas Teal, given her mental state, can just show up. She can be spooked. She can just suddenly notice, oh wow, it's really cold. But it's something we need to work on. It's something we need to fix going forward. That there is the proper atmosphere through here by the end, but we don't establish it. We don't build up to it. And we could do that while heightening the narrative, and we don't. And that's a really big shortcoming. Um, so as Teal enters this valley, it's also very foggy. That's another aspect of it. It's getting really cold. It's getting really foggy. Um, we haven't really described how the rain is transitioning into kind of more of a sleet here. I think maybe that's another point coming up that we talk about, like, oh yeah, the weather doesn't really line up here. What's going on there? But throughout the fog, throughout the increase in atmosphere, there should be a greater reliance on Lacrimosa to see where she's going. Um, we've mentioned Teal is carrying the lantern now in her in her lantern. She's carrying the lantern in her hand almost constantly at this point. And she should be, kind of raising the lantern up, squinting, having a tough time peering through the fog, having a tough time keeping track of where the path is going as it twists left and right. Just so we can add a greater emphasis on the lack of clarity in her environment at this time. Just another note here that on the idea of fog, right? As Teal gets into the valley here, she starts hearing music. The music we mentioned earlier starts to crop up. Teal doesn't really know its origin. She at first thinks it's from the mountain, but then she's like, no, wait a minute. This is coming from the fog. This is coming from in front of me, not the mountains. Those were behind me. Where is this music? And it sounds different. It's got its own quality. It's got like a jauntiness to it. And just an aspect of that, of it coming from the fog, is that when the music fades, it should be described as dispersing amongst the haze. Just a little thing, but it incorporates the music in the environment to a much greater degree. Yeah, so are you looking here? Wow. Wow, 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 wowie, wow. So this all has to do with the Wanderer, right? Because the Wanderer shows up. The Wanderer basically just shows up out of the blue. And this first note here is how we're going to tackle this, because there's a lot of different disparate parts that need adjusting, and most of them have to do with the Wanderer themselves. Let me set things up a little bit here, right? She hears the music starts to fade. Teal's really confused. She's in the fog. It's getting cold. She's trying to press on, and as she does, she where are we here? We're in this paragraph here. Um, she hears the music and she's sort of frightful. She's worried that this beast that the pilgrim mentioned might be coming for her. But the music fades, and in this moment she thinks, okay, well, whatever it was must have missed me. She has a breather, she calms down a little bit, and she conquers herself. She turns into the fog to continue along the trail, and then suddenly, very suddenly, almost uncannily, this little creature, this little fella is just standing right in front of her, and it just scares the bejesus out of Teal. And lo and behold, it is your guy, it's your man, it's your strange otherworldly entity of boundless potential and um, unknowable intellect. It's the Wanderer. Y'all know him. I mean, actually, like most of you don't know him. I think it's probably just Robin who knows who I'm talking about, and me. And Teal. I guess Teal learns who they are. That's what we're going to talk about. But the Wanderer shows up. Okay, and there's a lot to correct and change here throughout pretty much the entire chapter. for pretty much the entire part about talking about the Wanderer. And there's so much about the Wanderer that I love. There are so many elements to them that are really special. And it's imperative that going through this, we be careful and we leave intact the parts that are to remain while altering that which needs to be changed, right? The end goal here is to make the character themselves more of a greater entity because they end up being really important both in this book and potentially beyond. They end up being this really integral character to the plot. And like, funnily enough, when I was writing the scaffolding for the book, this was just kind of like a throwaway chapter, but it ends up being really, really, really important going forward. So that being the case, this next session might get a little disorienting. I'm going to try to, and I have in my notes, I've ordered everything based on the order in which it's revealed in the text. So as we go along, you're going to experience things how I experience things by the order in which they crop up as one reads. And like I said in my summary, basically they just talk. There's a lot of talking here, and like that's why this chapter is so big, because there's a whole chapter basically devoted to, hey, we're setting up that Teal is really going through it, and then the back half of the chapter is, hey, here's a little fella, here's a little creep, Teal's going to talk to them and have a philosophical debate, and that takes up another big chapter in its own right. But unfortunately, there's no parsing these two. There's no splitting them because there isn't a good way to, at least with the format I've set up here. Well, without further ado, let's hop in. Let's start talking about the Wanderer. So Teal turns and the Wanderer's right there, and honestly, I love that. I love that so much that the way we introduce them is just being like, oh no, they're there. They're right there. They're right in front of you. How have they been there the whole time? I don't know. Well, you weren't really paying attention, were you? We start off Teal's experience with this individual with a really jarring presence. How did they get there? The way Teal reacts to is really in character. It's really fun. I don't know if it necessarily reflects her instability in this moment, but maybe we could tie that in with the action. We could, from a narrative point of view, tie that in a little better. I also really, really like that part of her reaction is that Teal almost drops Lacrimosa and expends a lot of energy and a lot of she does fall over. She hurts herself, essentially. It is not a comfortable landing, but she makes sure to catch Lacrimosa, and that too is also very in character. And this is what I mean, right? The whole act is very unbalanced, and we could work that into the narrative via subtext. Teal is unbalanced because, she is maybe a little insane. So their initial reaction is to squeak at Teal, right? They kind of just like laugh at her and squeak. Where is it? They kind of just go like, hi, right? Which isn't bad, but I don't like it. I don't love the way they present themselves. The Wanderer makes their introduction. I don't love it. And we're going to get into why later on, but now isn't the time. Unfortunately, we just got to press ahead. So trust me, we'll talk about more on that later, but right now we got to do some rearranging. We have to reorient the segment in a way that the Wanderer cuts Teal off abruptly, and as she turns, oh, sorry. What I'm saying here is that we need to have them interrupt her as she turns back to the path. And we want to do this for like subtext. We want to do this for narrative and like imagery and whatnot, right? They're interrupting Teal as she's trying to get back to what she wants to do, but there's been an interruption, but the Wanderer gets in the way, right? We're being a little on the nose, but it's also nice subtextual writing. So just something to correct. Instead of having them standing in front of Teal and scaring her, they want to like just wham, be there as she turns, be a little more aggressive in her face. Um, yeah, instead of like just turning and there's a little guy and going, ah, she turns and bump, there, ah, she's suddenly caught off guard by this cacophony, as if the wanderer, with their, because it turns out they're holding this concertina, this little accordion instrument, and maybe they just slam it in her face. Maybe they're absolutely out to get her from the get go. They are, no longer just standing there being passive. They are an active participant. And it's the result, right, of this spook, of this fright, of this cacophony, of this great din that startles Teal. She's not just losing her balance because she turns and there's a little fella and she gets a little scared. The wanderer is going out of their way to kind of mess with Teal, right? Um, and it's only after she is kind of in pain, um, that she realizes the wanderer is starting to laugh at her. Um, and it should be here that while she's being laughed at, that this shape that is the wanderer kind of teases her. They wriggle, they chortle, and it's then that Teal realizes their form, right? Not after she gets up. Right now, she gets up, she dusts herself off, and then she kind of comes to. She's like, wait a minute, you're weird. But it should be at this low point, right after she gets startled, that she has a moment of like, oh, what is this thing? Why is it laughing at me? How is it making those noises? I can't comprehend this thing. And from there, we split to 2 points. We split to two important aspects of the Wanderer. The first being their laughter. The Wanderer has this very characteristic laughter. It's meant to sound like ravens or crows, kind of like chortling and screaming together. Um, and I really like how I textually represented this laughter. But I think we could maybe adjust it slightly. And this is kind of only if need be. Um, it should come off as more of like a rolling guttural cackling. It should be kind of hideous. It isn't meant to evoke something that sounds natural, but it is meant to evoke laughter. And I don't really like right now have a great reason, a great way to exemplify that. If you've ever been outside and been yelled at by a murder of crows, you probably have the closest thing I could say to what I want the noise to sound like, right? Like a murder of crows when clearly all the crows are kind of mad at you for being in their turf. Um, that's not a great that's not a great sonic experience to have to walk through, but it is a unique one and one that I think would um, kind of reflect the sort of vibe I want from the Wanderer here. But we need to further embellish Teal's observations of the act. We need to describe how she is part of this assessment of the Wanderer from the get go, right? Because Teal is our POV character, and we need to experience things through her. Um, this laughter isn't merely spooky, it should sound as if it's coming from several sources. Again, to refer to a murder of crows, each crow is in a different spot, kind of like meh, meh, making noises at you. Similarly here, there, and probably more creepily, there is only one individual, but the sound should be as if it's coming from all different spots around Teal, as if she is, at least in an auditory way, surrounded by these noises. Maybe Teal got on that 5.1, that 7.1 Dolby surround sound, right? Maybe she got on the headphones, who knows? But still, it should sound like it's coming from all points around her, not just or originating from this little creep who's dancing in front of her. Um, Not only that, her reactions to this are just kind of muted presently. Her first interaction with the Wanderer should just absolutely scare the pants off of her. And she isn't wearing pants, so I guess it would scare the skirt off of her. But still, the point still holds. There should be this, and I alluded to it by framing it as a murder of crows, but there should be a really animalistic quality to the wanderer's laughter. And there already kind of is, but it's something that should probably be like embellished. Um, and even here, I'm correcting myself that crows would be more apt. Right now, I describe it as like a group of ravens, and ravens are fine. They've got kind of like that throaty remark, but I think the cutting, the like bright, um, noticeable, distinctive quality of a crow's caw, of a cackle, of a chastisement that comes from the crow's call, would be a little more apt. I think it would read a lot better here rather than describing it as being like a raven. I lived with ravens for a little while, and they're kind of just, I don't know. How would you describe a raven versus a crow? I guess they're kind of like a little more, they're really big for starters. They're really big, and they kind of have this, like, I definitely get what Poe meant with Quoth the Raven, because ravens have this air of just judging you, but they're not nasty like crows. They don't tell you. They just judge you and then kind of like, whatever. Meh. I'm a raven. I'm going to fly away. I'm going to go eat garbage somewhere. But a crow will definitely sit up in a tree and just heckle you and like, stinky. Why are you walking? Dumb, stinky. You don't have wings. Stupid. I'm going to go eat garbage now. Stupid. Like a crow will definitely tell you that you are a lesser species than it. And I think that kind of fits the vibe more of like what the Wanderer's going for here, what I want their facade to be anyways. And on that note, we do need to move beyond this notion of this cackle sounding purely feral, especially at the inception. We describe it right off the bat of seeming like a murder of ravens, right? Seeming as like a group of ravens. And I think that does a disservice to the Wanderer, especially right out the gate. It does a disservice to their ability to create sonic unease. And that's not good. That's not good. We want them right off the bat to come out swinging, to be this force to be reckoned with. And we don't do a lot right now to set that up. There should almost be this kind of like warmth to their laughter, right? It should sound like laughter. It should sound like merriment, but it should sound like merriment that is caustic, that is toxic. Almost as if you were at the center of a ring of bullies that are cackling at you because they pulled down your shorts or something, right? And I'm definitely not projecting. That definitely never happened to me. I have no experience in the matter. You cannot prove that I do. But if I did, I would say that this moment would be a lot like that. However, it should both be feral and hideous, but undeniably be laughter. And I don't know exactly how we're going to go about that. I don't know if my descriptions really come off in that way. I don't know if my commentary on crows makes that believable, but it's something we need to establish right out the bait. Right out the gate. I was going to say get-go. Where did that B even come from? Whatever. Right out the gate. It's something we need to build up. And this last note here is something that I'm not sure will make sense, but it should sound as if the laughter is bubbling from the Wanderer's throat, right? As though, kind of as if once the laughter is out on the air, it reverberates around and surrounds Teal. In a sense, right? I made the joke about Dolby surround sound, but that should be kind of what it's like when you're wearing headphones and you can tell where sounds from a game or a movie are coming from. Or what's the classic one where you get the haircut, you get the buzzers, you get the haircut from the barber who does your hair in surround sound, kind of like that, except there's clearly only one source of audio. Right? It would be like doing having that experience, having the barber cut your hair audio experience, except there's only one speaker sitting in front of you, right? That would be jarring. That would be really weird. That's how Teal feels right now. It's as if she knows the sound is originating from the Wanderer's voice box, from their larynx, from their throat, but somehow the sounds are projected outward and bounce at Teal from different directions. Once again, I apologize if this makes no sense, but alas, the Wanderer is not made to make a sense. So just stick with me, folks. This chapter is a doozy, and it's not supposed to make a lot of sense. It is, like I said, the zenith of Teal's insanity appears in this chapter, and there's a reason, and it's because the insane thing that doesn't make any sense shows up. The Dr. Seuss character shows up and has a bunch of funny rhymes, and then they hit Teal over the head with a hammer, and then she just wakes up at the bell tower at the end. That's really what happens in the middle here. Teal has a funny time with the Dr. Seuss character, and then she goes to the bell tower. Let's be honest, we could rip this chapter out. No, we couldn't. I would be heartbroken if we ripped chapter 35 out. But let's get back on track. We need to talk about the Wanderer's form. And I have in parenthesis initial form here because they kind of do go through some adjustments as they go along, and we'll talk about that as it happens. But first and foremost, we need to include that it is difficult for Teal to perceive the Wanderer. And this is a big change. Right now, Teal's got a pretty good grasp. They describe what the Wanderer looks like to the best of their abilities, and the Wanderer stays holistic throughout the chapter. We never talk about the Wanderer being anything different than what they are. They move funny, they move strangely, they act funny, but Teal, throughout all of this, perceives them consistently. And that's a big thing I want to address. Teal should not be able to perceive them consistently. That should be one of the key aspects to the Wanderer, is that they are always shifting in some regard, that they are never consistent. In this vein, to ground kind of what I mean, as they're laughing at her, the form of the Wanderer should shift. You know, it should almost crinkle. It should jitter. There should be after images to it. The Teal can never in one moment completely understand the physical form of the Wanderer. It should be almost that they're an unnatural part of reality. And we'll get more on why this makes sense in a little bit, maybe even next episode, if that's what I'm going to do here, which is looking like it because we're almost at the 2-hour mark and we're not even at 16, we're not even halfway done these notes. I'm so cooked, fam. I hope academics look back on this series and see the folly of a very, very stupid author. I hope some future civilization looks back at this series for research, for academic research, and they have to sit through all of this terrible, terrible content just because their professor was like, let's study this ancient tome from this clearly cracked and unstable individual. Yes, you have to watch all of the videos from end to end. No, you cannot speed through them because this idiot rambles and you'll never know when they're about to say something really, really important or really, really stupid. At least this is a podcast now, right? So you can just listen to this. You can just listen to this while you drive. If somebody ever, hey folks, if you're listening to this while you're driving, stay safe out there. But also, hey, thank you. That means a lot to me. The fact that I'm in your ear, chatting with you, we're having kind of an intimate moment here. People who listen to the VOD, people who don't come in for the stream. Are you listening to me on the road? Where are we going? Are we going? Oh, are you taking me on a little date? Ooh, I did not consent to that. Please let me out. Let me out right now. I demand. I did not consent to this romantic encounter. I'm leaving. Good day. I'm just kidding. I didn't go anywhere. I'm still here. How's it going? Hey, did you notice? I can do it. I can do this now. I can zoom in and then I can zoom back out. That's a visual gag. For all the people who actually watch this series, I just did a visual gag. Thanks for coming. Basically, that's Robin. Thanks for coming, Robin. Hope you're having a good time. Welcome to a local podcast where the presenter just derails the conversation right in the middle of their own content. Geez, I wonder why no one watches my stream. Funny how this happened. At least I know Robin's having a good time. Robin's sitting here just having a laugh at how cracked I am, which is good, which is great. Wish more of my friends would come up and do the same, but here we are. So, right, the Wanderer doesn't look natural. They look a little weird. They're funny. Teal can't really perceive them. It is imperative that we build this sense that the Wanderer cannot exist in one place consistently. Okay, I know I said that really slow as a joke, but I also meant it for meaning, right? This is really important. This is what all I'm about to talk about boils down to. The Wanderer struggles, or perhaps cannot, exist in one place consistently. They are constantly in flux. They are not a being, an entity that can maintain a, a holistic physical appearance. Okay? Or, at the very least, and much more likely, it's very difficult for Teal to understand their physical presence. And more on that later. We're going to keep talking about this. We're going to keep talking about why this is weird. Why can the Wanderer not exist? Why can Teal not perceive them properly? So this is an important caveat, right? It's important that we mention that Teal's first perception of the Wanderer is seeing them laugh at her, and it's in this state that they are at a peak. They're at a peak of instability. It's in this state that Teal is really struggling to get a good handle on what they are, on what they're doing, and what they look like. And as they simmer, as the Wanderer simmers, as they calm down, and as Teal can come to as well, she develops a better understanding, a better comprehension for their physical being, of their form, right? So we want to exemplify this in the text. I'm not just saying this to be cute, to be coy. This is something that needs to be included in the text. Teal gets scared. The Wanderer laughs at them. Teal notices them while being laughed at, and she soaks in all of this hard to believe, hard to digest information regarding the Wanderer. And it's afterwards that she makes further observation that now that they're not laughing, now that they seem to be a little more calm, their appearance is more consistent. I don't know if I described that properly, but I got to keep moving on regardless. I hope that idea comes across. Overall, Teal's observations of the Wanderer's personage, of their appearance, of their form, of their physique, should be more nebulous. To the extent that she never really even should consider what species they might be, of what race they might be. They're just some sort of thing, right? They're just some sort of being. Teal really doesn't have a good word for it, and that should be something we should probably even mention, that Teal struggles to put into words what the Wanderer is or might be. She just doesn't have the vocabulary or the ideas or the tools to describe what kind of thing they are. And we kind of do that right now by having Teal sort of lean on these ideas that, okay, they're an imp, they're a nymph, they're a demon, they're something otherworldly. They don't make sense. So she's using these words that describe something that is not of this world. You know, they exhibit traits that are somewhat familiar. They have arms and legs, a head, as far as Teal knows. She's like pretty sure they have a head. But they should have these alien qualities too. They look like a person of what Teal would define as a person, but she's never certain. She's never really 100% sure that, yeah, the Wanderer is a person, I guess. I don't think they're a human. Definitely not a half-elf, not a cute cat boy. What do I do? I guess you're just a being. You're just there. You're just right there. And it's this otherness, right? It's this wall between Teal knowing what the Wanderer is and seeing them and interacting with them that keeps her from considering them a them. A big part of this chapter is Teal initially conceiving as the Wanderer as an it, right? Like I said, she's kind of convinced at the start that the Wanderer is something of a monster, that they're this malign, nasty little creature. They're otherworldly. Maybe she, were Teal in the right mind, she might consider them to be of the arcane, that they're kind of magical in nature, that they're not completely natural. Maybe she thinks they're fabricated. I don't know. Um, but it's important that we put a stake in the idea that Teal, from the get-go, considers them an it, that they are an object, that they are a creature, that they don't, maybe, like whatever semblance of sentience they have doesn't quite make them a person. And that they transition, right? They go from Teal's perception of the Wanderer transitions from them being an it to a them. And we'll get more on that later. But right now we need to start off this observational trajectory by revealing, yes, Teal thinks the Wanderer is an it right from the hop. They're just this chaotic wad of energy in the shape of a bipedal humanoid. That's really like all Teal can surmise from their initial encounter. They're not quite a person to Teal. They're just like a thing that Teal doesn't have words to describe. There's one line in here where Teal describes them as being, oh, well, they were certainly alive. And that's probably the best way I could boil it down. The Wanderer sure is alive. Teal is certain that it is living, that it is a thing, that it can communicate, but aside from that, she's really just clueless. She can't put a pin on any of the aspects that this little creepazoid is. In regards to the Wanderer's apparel, because they are kind of wearing some garments, they've got on this shawl that covers their torso. I think we should describe this shawl as being a little more special. It should be intricate, it should be colorful, but, and that's kind of how we describe it now, it should have these qualities of being impossible to describe, of undulating and existing in ways that Teal just doesn't have words for, of displaying lights and colors that Teal, has no point of reference for. Pardon me for a moment. I have an eyelash in my eye. I need to get it out. I think I got it. I think that'll do. Where were we? So yeah, the Wanderer's cloak should be a little more consistently weird. It should be kind of nebulous and indescribable. It should undulate in weird ways. It should move, as if caught by the wind, even though there's no breeze. And there seems to be this shifting, these inconsistent colors. Its pattern is always changing. But there should be harmony to it. There should be a through line throughout its design. Teal recognizes it as an article of clothing, and that should remain. It should never not be a shawl, but she can't rationalize how it's put together. She can never really wrap her head around, how is it stitched? What cloth is it made from? How is that designed? Like, was that spun on a loom? Was that stitched together? Like, was it crocheted? Was it knitted? How was this made? And she can never wrap her head around that because the design, the composition of it should always be in flux, much like the Wanderer's physical appearance. Right. And I'm doing a bad job at describing it because I really do want to avoid talking about that it's constantly shifting, that this is something like a flag. It's always waving in the wind. Its shape is always changing. It should be something that's not some kind of psychedelic pattern or some kind of kaleidoscope. The shawl is this article that the Wanderer wears. It isn't something that's always shifting, that has no format to it. It should, like, Teal should have a tough time rationalizing it, but she should always be consistent that, like, yeah, no, they're wearing something. They are wearing a shawl. I am certain that that is a shawl, and I'm pretty sure you are a person, but you keep wiggling around and your sweater shawl thing keeps changing, and I am having a really tough time figuring out what you are, right? As if they're like a little cricket that keeps jumping around and Teal's trying to identify them. And I come to the conclusion that maybe it's best to describe it in a way that makes sense to me which is that it's as if, and we're still talking about the shawl here. I'm sorry if I lost some of you, but come on back. We're still talking about the shawl. It's as if, and we're going to have to put our mind into if the book were an animated series, if the book were on the big screen. And it's as if every time we cut away from the wanderer, their shawl or their poncho changes when we see them again. It could be a new color, it could be a new design, but the shape would usually stay the same. In fact, the shape would probably be the only part of it that stays the same. It might have a pattern on it, it might have a texture to it, it might lose that, it might fluctuate in one scene. It might shift from green to yellow in one scene, and then the next it's just a solid red. After that, it looks like a beautifully rendered gingham pattern, and then in the next, it's just got like polka dots, just like flat polka dots, no rendering whatsoever. Maybe in one scene, it's just black, right? Very comic book style, very, very flat, very dynamic. Um, and I don't really know how I'd go about describing that in a textual format, but that's kind of the core essence I want this shawl to have. It should be consistent, but it should be consistently inconsistent, which is terrible and awful. And I don't know how I'm going to fix that. I don't know how I'm going to address that, but that's what it should be like. So there is this blackness to the Wanderer. They have kind of this cosmic quality to them, this nebulous, this universe cosmic quality to them, right? Almost like a starscape. And it's as if their body is contained, right? Or like contains this painted universe, so to speak. And I hope this will make more sense as I ramble on about it. But their appendages, especially, should be described as possessing this cosmic quality. Their shawl, which covers their torso, is different from their arms and legs. Their arms and legs should be shifting. They should be embodying this endless movement, this slow reverberation of space, right? The constant shifting of space and nebulas around the infinite expanse of the universe. That's what these parts of the body should imbibe. And it should be another sticking point that the arms and legs almost possess no volume, that they have no mass, but they exist in space. Right? And I don't know how many of you I've lost here. Probably all of you. But essentially, what I'm saying is that the Wanderer is an enigma. The Wanderer should exist as an enigma in which none of their aspects really make sense in a typical environment, right? They don't take up space, but there they are. They have no mass, they have no volume, but they're clearly in front of teal. The shawl is clearly an article of clothing, but it seems to change and shift at will. How is it doing that? What is it made of? It doesn't matter, but there the Wanderer is, and they don't really have a head, but they have a face, and they have a mask, and they have a hat. But how are they doing that if all of them doesn't exist here in this space? How are you doing that? How are you doing that, you creepy little guy? Quit it. Exist in 3 dimensions or get out of here. And the Wanderer just says, no, I don't think I will. And that's why we love them. And to describe this, and again, a way that makes sense to me as somebody who's worked in animation and graphic design and different fields of visual art, it's as if the texture, right? It's as if we modeled the Wanderer and the texture we inserted for their arms and legs is a shifting image, right? No matter how you render the Wanderer, no matter in what light, their arms and legs will always be a flat image of an undulating star field, of a slowly shifting nebula. Right? You could look at them from the front, you could look at them from the back or the side, but you would always see the same slowly moving space reflected in their appendages. Um, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if that cleared it my ideas up for anyone, but that really fixed it for me. Thinking about it in that sense, I was like, oh, okay, no, that is exactly how it would work. The Wanderer does take up space, but it's just like, it doesn't matter how you look at them. It seems as though their arms and legs are nothing more than a star field, which would, in a vacuum, that seems really confusing. But if you were to imagine them right in front of you right now, or beside you, if you're in a vehicle driving me to somewhere unbeknownst to me, if you were to imagine them nearby, they would take up space. They would be there, and you would know. You could see them. You could probably understand that they are relative to their coordinates in space, but to look at their arms and legs and fingers and toes and appendages or what have you, you would just see this solid state, this solid hunk of space kind of just floating along. And that's the wonder. That's their arms and legs anyways. Um I Along these lines, right? I haven't really touched on it yet, but the Wanderer does have this kind of cartoonish quality to them. They've got these strange proportions. They're like their legs just kind of end up in like points. It's just as if their legs go down to a point where their ankles turn into the toes of a boot. And I really like that. Their fingers, their arms and fingers are kind of just these like extensions. They don't really have hands or wrists. They just have arms that go out to fingers, and their fingers are just wiggling around, and maybe they're part of the arm, or maybe they're just floating there independently, but we never really talk about it. I really like this idea that there is a cartoonish and unbelievable quality to the Wanderer. Um, and to exemplify that, Teal should have this overarching idea when she's trying to piece the Wanderer together in her mind that she's unsure if they really have a body. She's unsure if under the shawl there's anything at all, because it seems from her point of view that the arms and legs just jut out from the shawl, that they kind of just appear from beneath the fabric. But she's never sure. She's like, I can't conceive of a way that there would be a torso under there, or hips, or a chest, or a neck. How are you doing that? How are you just a shawl with appendages and a hat and a mask? How are you doing all of that? That doesn't make sense. That's not how things are supposed to be. Um, I just have a gag here written like maybe she checks, maybe she tries to check, maybe she tries to speak under the Wanderer's shawl, maybe she tries to sneak a peek, because she understands it's crass and she probably shouldn't, but it would ease her worrying. Like, what am I talking to? Do you have a body? Can I trust you? You are getting to the point of being so alien that I don't know if I know if you have a body, right? And I don't know if you've talked to anybody who maybe doesn't have a body before, but it's a little jarring. It's a little concerning if you can't tell if the being you're conversing to is existing in the same plane as you. I can't say I have much experience doing that. I have talked to otherworldly beings on occasion. More on that in never, but it's weird. It's weird, and also hard, and also difficult. But I'm just gonna keep moving on because I don't want to talk about that anymore. Um, God, are we still talking about this freaking creep? Oh my God, we keep talking about him forever. Okay, maybe when we get done talking about the Wanderer, I will call the episode. Um, where are we here? Where are we? We're very scant on details regarding the Wanderer's head. We don't talk about their face region or their visage very much at all. And I think that's okay, kind of, given their mystique. But Teal should have the impression that, um, like, she's pretty sure they should have hair, right? There should be depth to their head, that they should have this human like, this person like quality. But this is another aspect that Teal should never be certain of. That she's just kind of assuming. She's like, yeah, no, they must, right? There's volume to their head. They're not just a mask, right? They're not just there. Like, wait a minute. Like, if she thinks about it too hard, she starts second guessing herself. How is your head actually shaped like that? How is your head in the hat? Do you have a cranium? What's going on there, right? These should be things that Teal is kind of disturbed by. Um, And there's an idea that the Wanderer is sort of like a mimic, that they're basically like maybe a doppelganger, a shapeshifter of sorts. Um, and they've kind of simplified themselves into an easily understandable form. Um, where this is something that's kind of difficult to describe, so I'm just going to keep charging ahead, and I apologize if I lose you along the way. So whereas Teal is a being, she gets the impression that the Wanderer is more like a drawing of a being. She can't fully comprehend that they're there in space, that they are existing, but she sees all of these disparate parts and goes, okay, arms and legs and body and head. Sure, if I saw that in a drawing, even a very crude drawing done by a youngster, you would go, yeah, that's a person. Similarly, here, Teal sees the Wanderer and goes, okay, I guess you're a person. But then, as one might look at the drawing of a youngster and go, okay, Johnny, okay, Tina, okay, um, Kiki, okay, Jerome, where's their hair? Where is their neck? Where are their ears? Little questions like that crop up. Why don't they have fingers? And obviously the answer is because it's the drawing from a youngster. Teal unfortunately doesn't have that fallback here. She just sees kind of like this crudely simplified being. And she's wigging out a little bit and she goes, okay, you're a thing. Why are you like that? Do you have hair? Do you have ears? Do you have a body? Do you have eyelids? Like, what? The list can go on forever, but Teal's not going to get any answers, of course. But this should be kind of the vibe we're trying to project out of Teal. That Teal is really hesitant and doesn't really know. She sees the shape of a being that is identifiable and recognizable and kind of comforts her, but there's enough of an uncanny experience for her to be unsure of what's going on here. Um, so the last kind of point about their head and face is that, well, not so much their face. We get more into that in the next step here. But there's nothing. The Wanderer has on this hat. I haven't really talked about it before because it's just kind of there, right? They're wearing a pointy hat, and it mimics Teal's cap a little bit, but it has its own unique charm to it. Um, and there's nothing inherently wrong with the hat. It's just something that falls off. It's just like I don't have much to critique about it because I don't talk about it at all. I can't even really describe it to you because I kind of just say, yeah, they have a hat on. The Wanderer wears a hat and it looks like Teal's a little bit, but it's different. That's all I say about it. So um, it just needs to be described more. And we just have to talk about the hat more in the future to make it kind of a unique entity that is distinct and also similar to Teal's, right? And I think we can probably do that by incorporating some of the elements we've already talked about. It can maybe either share similarities with the Wanderer's arms and legs, or it can exist in tandem with their shawl and have this shifting quality, this undulating, this never consistent fabric. Maybe it even just changes shape. Maybe that's kind of its thing. Maybe every time we cut back to the Wanderer, they've got a different style of hat on. That'd be ridiculous, but it is something we could do. I don't think it is, but it's a fun idea. But yeah, we just got to do the hat. We just got to do the hat in the future. With regards to the face, like I said, we're going to talk about that next. There are some really important details that are missing that need to be included. The mask, like the rest of the Wanderer, should be hard for Teal to define. She should never really be certain if it's a mask or if it is their face. And this kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about with the head. Is the head a head or is it just an extension of the mask? Is there actually depth to the mask? Teal can never really get a good idea, right? She might like lean to the side and try to get a good sense for the depth of the mask, but she can never fully see the entire cranium of the Wanderer. And maybe even if she does, there's kind of just like black nebula at the back of the head. I don't know. Or maybe the hat sits in such a way that it's perpetually covering the back of the Wanderer's head. Teal never is afforded the luxury, can never know the extent of if the wanderer has a full head because the hat's always there. Maybe we can tie a joke into that later, where Teal is like so deranged and so like just desperate to figure out what the wanderer is that she tries to steal their hat or something, which tries to pull it off their head. But the mask should be something that's hard for Teal to define. Uh, because it never really, like, once again, a child's drawing, the mask is just there. It never appears fastened to anything or tied on. It's just there. It is just a distinctive feature of the wanderer's face. It's just how they, pardon the pun, are masking. um we should describe it as having kind of a mineral quality, almost as if it's made from stone or marble. It seems impossibly smooth. It doesn't have blemishes. Teal should find this mask really uncanny. And I'm thinking back to, the old Greek, the drama masks, the comedy and the tragedy masks, where they're just so iconic, but as if it's part of a sculpture, and the mask has just taken on a life of its own. Which is just going to double down on the idea that the eyes and the mouth of this surface move on their own. They seem to move smoothly. They're not rigid. They're not cast into one shape, even though it seems like the mask is made of marble or a surface that should not move. The lips and the eyes of the wanderer should shift and contort naturally, or as natural as like two big holes and like a slit for a mouth can move. The wanderer does emote, and that should be another aspect of this. They do emote, they do move, and they do speak, and they do articulate their speech, but none of it really lines up perfectly, because yeah, they're missing facets of their emotion, right? They don't have like eyebrows, they don't have a nose, they don't have the complex facial structure to emote like Teal does, but they still express themselves. There is this rift between expression and um, impression, I guess. Um, yeah, into this is just another way one can think about this, and we're going back to the 3D design because why not? We've been talking about that this whole time, but it's as if the eyes and the mouth float above the mask, right? And this is a very common thing with 3D models. There might be a flat surface, and then the eyes and mouth are all scripted to appear as 2D textures on top of that 3D plane. Thank you, Robin. I'm trying my best. I hope you're having a good time. I am not. I am suffering. Please save me. Um, but right, this is how you can think of it, right? The eyes and the mouth of the wanderer's face are alike to a 2D plane hovering over a 3D surface. They can shift, they move, they emote, and they articulate just like they need to convey a depth and what is needed for emotion. But right? And if you've ever seen a model like this, right? Like old PS1, PS2 era models, the face texture, the face model doesn't have the polygrams to actually move like that. They're just kind of faking it, and you buy into it because it looks fun. But Teal here in her reality is looking at this and just going, "Oh, I'm buying into it all right, but you are creeping me the heck out. You are a little weirdo, and I don't know if I like you." Um, so as an addition to that, because these aspects exist in an uncanny reality, they should be described with a more disturbing quality to them, as if these eyes are kind of like two great holes. Um, and even more than that, right? That's kind of what I use to describe them now, is that they're just two great holes, but that doesn't really do it. That's not enough to convey how disturbing it is to kind of exist near the wanderer and talk to them. They should be something more of a chasm, that there's no end to them, that it isn't just that they're a pit, that they're a hole in the mask, that they're, no, these are endless voids existing in front of the mask and yet having an incalculable depth. Um, they're infinite and they're impossible to understand. Um, and on this note, making eye contact with the Wanderer is something Teal should avoid. Teal should always feel really uncomfortable, really just almost as if looking into the eyes makes her feel as though she's going to fall into them. And maybe we can reference back to her nightmare where she was falling for forever and ever and ever. She doesn't want to, right? That is not a comfortable thing for her. She does not want to fall into this void that are these voids rather that are the Wanderer's eyes. Doesn't even want to glance at them, because when she does steal a look at their eyes, she kind of a shiver gets sent down her spine. And this is just another facet that Teal can't really perceive the Wanderer properly. She is both mesmerized and wants to look at them, but when she does, she is just absolutely disturbed and grossed out, and finds the aspects of them chilling to her bone while also captivating. I guess kind of like, a car crash or something, if you want to think of it that way. The mouth, however, we kind of do a better job of describing presently. The Wanderer doesn't really flap their gums, right? They don't they don't really have a jaw, and that's kind of the big thing that differentiates their face from this 3D model that is moving to a 3D plane that is stationary, while a 2D model is kind of like I just did. When I talk, my mouth just kind of goes up and down, and that's kind of what the Wanderer's mouth does. And while it does articulate in the crudest sense, it doesn't have the great degree of control that a human throat and mouth and teeth have to express speech. However, these sounds are still coming out of the Wanderer. They are still speaking very clearly and very concisely, and also they have these weird animal noises that are coming out of them. But a big part of why them talking is weird is because their mouth doesn't necessarily correlate to what they're saying. And right now, despite me saying we describe it well, we don't bring up that aspect very well, and that's not good. Their emotions as well, like when they smile, should be something that sickens Teal. And although the Wanderer isn't perpetually sinister, they are sometimes sinister. We need to establish this idea that Teal can never shake the idea that there's more to this face than what they're projecting. That despite the Wanderer's potential inability to emote, there's more going on behind their visage than what is on display. There's, while their emotions are earnest and easy to read, there's more behind what they're saying and their actions and their meaning than what's right there in front of Teal. And I see I made the same masking joke in my notes, so I can check that off. I can stamp that off my bingo card. There we go. Not quite a bingo yet, but we're getting there. Page 13, we're getting there. I think we're almost, yeah. So when we get to this point here, when we finally get talking about the Wanderer's appearance, we will put a pin in the episode, which hopefully doesn't take another half hour, but it just might. Where were we? Right. The Wanderer is masking. They don't emote very well. And this definitely isn't an allusion to anything. We're definitely not writing things into the subtext here, but you could read it that way if you want to. I won't stop you. And this is more of like a physical description, more of like how the Wanderer acts. So bear with me for a moment. We come to this point where the Wanderer is like dancing. They are quote unquote dancing. And this isn't a bad notion, but I don't think it serves them properly. It should be reiterated here that Teal is simplifying what she doesn't understand. And this harkens back to kind of what I was saying when the Wanderer is jittering, when they're rolling around, when they're laughing at Teal. Teal right now just kind of describes it as dancing, as they're jittering, as they're fidgeting. But we don't describe that is because Teal doesn't have like I said, the tools. She doesn't have the language to fully comprehend or express what the wanderer is doing. She both has an inability to perceive the wanderer, but she further has an inability to express what they're like. And that's kind of what we should be taking away from all of this, especially the initial interaction. That Teal is having a really tough time putting a pin in what they are, but also is having a tough time describing that and conveying her thoughts and feelings and emotions with regards to the wanderer. So she is just using simpler speech. She's saying that yes, they're dancing and they're fidgeting because she doesn't know really how to put it into words. But what it really boils down to is that the wanderer is a being that cannot remain still. And they can't remain still. They don't remain still because Teal isn't able to fully perceive them. She is not able to consistently perceive them. And I think that's an important caveat. She is not able to persistently conceive the wanderer at any one moment, in any given frame. You know, to bring back the animation illusions, it's as if the wanderer is running at 60 frames per second, but Teal really only has the ability to see them at 30 frames per second. So sometimes there's like a weird blurring, there's a weird blending of frames that Teal can't really catch up to. She can't really perceive it. And there might be subtle, one frame animations that are just left out. Teal just can't understand them. She doesn't even really comprehend them because they're just left out of the cycle. And so they might appear just as like jitterings. Yeah, so I'm just saying here, when Teal perceives, when she describes this dancing, it is the wanderer in flux. She is using the language she does have to the best of her abilities to decoct what the wanderer is actually doing and describe it as such. So when they're going through this, it's important that we talk about how this reader is unsure, right? If we need to impart to the reader that Teal is fighting this idea that she's unsure if her fatigue is just really getting to her, or if this is really happening right now. She's not sure if the wanderer is just this way because that's how they are, or if because she's really struggling with what's going on in this present moment. As if the idea that she can't keep up with what the wanderer is doing. She's unsure if maybe this is another hallucination for all she knows. And we can do that by describing Teal as being lethargic, as blinking really slowly, as kind of lagging throughout the scene. And while she is having these observations, we as readers should always be unsure if she is kind of just out of it, or what's the deal. So this is the last thing. And because it's the last thing, I really need water. Oops. And I need to hit my microphone, apparently, because my throat really hurts. Okay. Ooh. Let's see if that gets me through this. So the last thing here is that Teal has these really haphazard considerations throughout the segment, and it's a really nice touch because despite her hysteria and her fear, the fact that some of her thoughts are really mundane is a really great way to show that she's not all there. She has some thoughts in through here where she's just kind of thinking like, okay. Like at one point she just points to herself and she's like, oh, are you talking to me? There's another point here where she doesn't know what to say to the wanderer, so she's just like, I really like your hat, smile. And we're just sprinkling throughout the scene this idea that Teal is kind of already off the deep end, that she's just like in this moment of uncertainty and instability in her life. She's just like, well, I guess I'll just default back to being a person maybe, funny weather we're having, isn't it? Little fella creature imp guy. It's not, I don't know, it's kind of funny, right? It's taking the piss out of the scene. It's taking the wind out of the sails of the scene in another aspect. But I think it serves a really good purpose to have Teal have these really strange and disjointed thoughts that serve no purpose to the overall gravitas of the scene. But she's still having them anyway. She's still just sitting around like, oh yeah, you have a nice hat, strange being I cannot comprehend. What kind of music do you like? Just stupid little things like that. It's a really nice touch, and it exemplifies that she's definitely not on the same wavelength here. She is not, she is scared, right? Part of her is fearful, but part of her is just so dulled to the moment. And she's just like, whatever, I have to keep going to the bell tower and you're kind of in the way. So yeah, you want to talk about the sports ball? I know a lot about sports ball, right? And she's trying to make small talk with this interdimensional being. And by the way, I lied. I thought that was the last point, but it's not. This is an idea. This isn't like a point. This isn't an observation. It's an idea, and it's a very stupid one. But along the lines of keeping in touch with Teal's senses throughout the narrative, why have we left out how the Wanderer smells? And I know, right? That's so bonkers of me to even say out loud. But why haven't we talked about how the Wanderer smells? We've been so keen on tying Teal's senses into every aspect of this story. And, I get throughout here, Teal is really dulled as a character. That's part of her heightened mental instability, is that we're really not talking about her senses at this point. But we have been in some regard, right? It's getting colder. She's noticing the atmosphere. She's appraising the colors here and there. She isn't completely muted to the world. It's just that there's a veneer of her instability stopping her from appreciating these things, but she is still having these observations. And as such, why does she meet this person and not smell him? You know? Well, we've really been, or at least going forward into draft two, I've been trying to make an effort to reserving scent for things that refresh Teal's memory, that bring about memory, right? Because that's how the brain works. I think it's your like amygdala or something is really close to your olfactory glands, and something like that. Smell brings on nostalgia and memory really easily. Um, I'm sure a neuroscientist could tell you way more about it than I can, but I've been trying to reserve that. And yet here, this would be a great opportunity for such a stupid gaffe, right? That's just why I want to include it. Just such a stupid joke. Um, and before we, and like, I think it would just serve as like a good speed bump before we really fall off the edge here. Because after this point, after Teal's observation, after her initial chit chat with the Wanderer, we really just fall into the Wanderer creep zone. What I'm denoting is the Wanderer creep zone here, and that's when they start talking about the metaphysical reality that exists between and among and throughout all existence, and also not existence. And maybe we'll talk about that next episode, but I doubt it. But the gaff would be this, right? So while appraising the Wanderer, Teal would just freeze up, and you know the Wanderer would have a moment of like, "Oh, what? Am I frightening you? Am I scaring you, Miss Evergarden?" And Teal's response would be a really strange one that I think would be delightfully tied with her present hysterics. And she's absolutely flabbergasted. She knows she shouldn't be saying this. She knows she shouldn't be thinking this, but it just kind of falls out of her regardless. Where she just says, "You, you smell really nice. You smell really good." And then they just stand there, and there's just this super awkward silence between the two. And then like to just end the scene, to just throw it out the window, the Wanderer just starts laughing. That's just how it would resolve, right? The Wanderer just thinks, "Oh well, this is ridiculous and I kind of love it. Yes, thank you. I didn't know I smelled good. You're the first person to ever say that to me." um And we could kind of heighten this by mentioning how Teal's kind of restraining herself from getting closer to the Wanderer, but she always kind of subconsciously has this desire to kind of like get close and sniff them because they smell good. Um, we could describe it as anything. We could describe it as anything that kind of like would attract Teal, something like freshly baked bread or like a home cooked meal. Maybe the Wanderer smells kind of nostalgic. That's why Teal's really drawn to them. Maybe it's something that's like on the cusp of jogging her memory, but she never quite gets to that point. You know what? That's actually a really good idea. I'm gonna jot it down here. Live note jotting, everyone. Hold on. Um, Perhaps this is due to a an element of nostalgia for Teal. Uh, the Wanderer, the Wanderer's scent reminds her of something, and she wants to know, to discover. That's a better word, to discover what it is. There we go. That's a great idea. I don't know if that will be the idea, but that like I'm spouting nonsense here, and that's one of the smartest things I've said today. So there we go. We'll include that. And with that crazy little anecdote, with that side correction, with Teal sniffing the Wanderer maybe in the future, which I think is the funniest shit. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a personal joke. But with that, folks, we are definitely going to have to turn this episode into a part two. We have over 18 pages left to talk about. There is so much garbage to talk about with this chapter. This might even turn into a 3-part episode, but we'll see, because I have been yapping my little lips off, and I think the notes going forward are less dense. I think they're more surface level, right? There's no more of this 8 layers deep nonsense. And I think some of the notes here are even just like for me specifically. They're not things I want to talk about out loud. But yeah, we'll leave things off here for today. We will pick things up next time. And hopefully we'll finish things next time. Hopefully we'll finish chapter 35 here. Because or there rather, because if this has to go to a 3-episode stream, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose my marbles. The one important caveat here is that this is by leaps and bounds the longest set of notes. I don't think any other set of notes comes close to being 32 pages. So this is the high point. This is as bad as it gets. This is as deep as we go. And then the rest from here is going to be smooth sailing. I'm pretty sure chapter 36 is pretty brisk. Chapter 37 should be easy. We might dwell on chapter 38 for like two plus hours. And then the last chunk of the book is all split up really nicely. They should make really nice episodes. But for now, that's going to do it for today. We are going to call it there. I've been talking for I told you 2 3/4 hours. I told you that's how long I would do. That's how long my larynx is lasting for. I don't know if you can tell. I bet you can go back to the start of the episode and hear how ragged my voice is now compared to then. But thanks for coming, everyone. I hope this was enlightening. I hope you enjoyed me talking for hours on end about a book you probably haven't read. If you do want to read it, you can see and read my book for free. It's up on AOE, link in the description. It's draft 1. I'm working on draft 2 right now. Head by the channel if you want to watch me play games and stuff. Otherwise, folks, I'm going to call it here. I'm going to run away. I'm going to go feed my cat. There was a knock at my door a while ago. I think somebody was on the phone for me, but work is work and phone calls got to wait. But I'll go check in on that now. Once again, thanks for dropping in, folks. I hope you enjoy the rest of your whatever, and I will see you next time. For now, bye-bye.